Ever get that feeling, where you're watching someone and it's like, whoa, how'd they go from there to here? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
That's what we're kind of tackling today, kind of a deep dive into Bam Margera.
Yeah.
You probably know him, like jackass, crazy stunts.
Sure.
But trust me, there's a whole lot more to unpack.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going deep.
Okay.
Using a surprising source.
Okay.
A thread.
Right.
From the, how do you even say this? The infamous
Infamous, yeah.
Kiwi Farms forum.
Okay, now I know what you might be thinking. Kiwi Farms, that corner of the internet known for, well, let's just say intense opinions. But, and here's the thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most unexpected places offer like incredibly raw perspectives. Yeah. It's like finding a hidden diary filled with just unfiltered thoughts and observations.
Okay, so we're diving into Bam Margera's story from like skateboard icon to, well, we'll get to that part.
We'll get there.
But we're using this Kiwi Farms thread almost like a map, right?
Yeah.
And one of the first things that it points out is Bam's early fascination with Vil Vallo,
Okay.
the lead singer of Him.
Right.
And he even talked about like wanting to live that rock star lifestyle, which, knowing him, involves some serious partying.
Yeah.
So do you think that early idolization of a certain kind of excess, right,
Mm-hmm.
planted the seeds for some of his later struggles?
It's certainly an interesting point, right? You have this young guy already drawn to risk-taking through skateboarding.
Yeah.
And then openly admiring someone known for, living on the edge.
Yeah.
And it's like, this thread is highlighting a potential pattern of behavior, like a fascination with pushing boundaries that might have had unintended consequences down the line,
Totally.
And the thread does like a fascinating job of tracking this trajectory, almost obsessively chronicling Bam's rise to fame, alongside these hints of something darker brewing beneath the surface.
Yeah, and it's so easy to point to the death of Ryan Dunn,
Right.
his close friend Jackass co-star, as the catalyst for Bam's downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
It's a narrative that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Tragic event leads to a downward spiral.
Right.
But then this thread throws a curveball, pointing out that Bam's first documented rehab stint was actually in 2009. That's 2 whole years before Ryan Dunn's passing.
Right, and that's where this unconventional source offers like a new layer of understanding. It challenges the simplistic narrative we often hear.
Yeah.
And forces us to look deeper, right?
Totally.
Bam's struggles weren't a sudden reaction to a single event,
Right.
but potentially part of a more complex and long-brewing storm.
Okay, so if Ryan Dunn's death wasn't the sole trigger, what were some of the other major turning points
Yeah, good question.
that this Kiwi Farms thread identifies in Bam's life?
Right.
Because things definitely took a turn, and this thread does not hold back in documenting those moments.
Oh, no.
Like the Earth Rocker video in 2015, his appearance on Dr. Phil in 2019,
Oh, right.
and of course the whole Jackass 4 situation.
Yeah, you're right. These are like pivotal moments.
Yeah.
And while it's crucial to acknowledge that these glimpses into Bam's life are often, messy and very public, they do offer insight into the complexities of his struggles with addiction and mental health.
Totally. I remember seeing that Earth Rocker video.
Yeah.
And it was rough, man.
Yeah.
You could tell he was hurting, but it was almost like he was trying to shock people
Yeah.
with how bad things had gotten.
Right.
What were your initial thoughts when you came across that part of the thread?
I had a similar reaction,
Yeah.
It felt like a cry for help disguised as a publicity stunt.
Yeah.
Like a desperate attempt to be seen and heard, even if it meant being seen at his lowest point. And then you have the Dr. Phil episode. That one was tough because it showed a different side of Bam, the way he lashed out at his loved ones, particularly his mother.
And you see that tension reflected in the forum thread too, right?
Right.
People are grappling with these two sides of Bam, the hilarious prankster they grew up with,
Right.
and this increasingly erratic and troubled individual.
Yeah.
It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You can't look away, even though you know it's going to be bad.
It's awful, yeah. Yeah, it's that train wreck analogy, I think that resonates with a lot of people.
Totally.
You mentioned the comments, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see how people are, like, processing this.
Yeah.
Some express genuine concern,
Right.
while others are much more critical. It's like this thread becomes a microcosm of our own, complicated relationship with their celebrity culture.
Totally.
We build these people up, we feel like we know them,
Right.
and then struggle to reconcile when the carefully constructed image crumbles.
Totally. There's this one comment that really stuck with me. Someone saying, Weird watching a very big part of your teens explode like this.
Wow.
And it speaks to that feeling of, like, almost personal investment.
Right.
Some fans have, especially those who, like, came of age watching Bam and the Jackass crew.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to compare Bam's trajectory to someone like Steve-O.
Oh, yeah.
Another Jackass alum who went through very public struggles.
Right.
But ultimately found a path to recovery and reinvention. The forum thread actually highlights this contrast, with some users even questioning why their paths diverge so dramatically.
Yeah, it's a good question.
It raises, some thought-provoking questions about the nature of addiction.
Right.
And the factors that contribute to someone's ability to turn their life around.
Right, because we often focus on the downfall.
Right.
The what went wrong.
Right.
But what about the how did they get better?
Right.
It's like this thread accidentally stumbled into, like, a case study.
Yeah.
You have two individuals,
Yeah.
both facing similar demons,
Right.
but with very different outcomes.
Right.
Did the forum offer any insights into those differences? Like, any clues as to why Steve-O's story took a more positive turn?
It's not explicitly stated, but you can glean, like, some possible explanations from the timeline that the thread meticulously lays out with Steve-O.
Yeah.
There seems to be a point where he recognizes the severity of his situation
Okay.
and makes a conscious decision to prioritize his well-being. Right.
Okay.
He surrounds himself with a strong support system
Yeah.
and commits to the recovery process.
Right.
Whereas with Bam, you see this, like, recurring pattern of fleeting attempts at sobriety,
Right.
followed by relapses and a tendency to blame external factors for his struggles.
Right.
It's important to note that,
Yeah.
we're speculating here based on limited information,
Sure.
but it does make you wonder about the role of, like, personal accountability
Yeah.
and internal motivation
Yeah.
in overcoming these kinds of challenges.
It's like the thread is unintentionally highlighting those internal struggles.
Yeah.
Even as it focuses on the external chaos. You see these moments where Bam talks about wanting to get better, to
Right.
be there for his family.
Yeah.
But then those moments are often followed by, like, more destructive behavior.
And that's the heartbreaking reality of addiction. You know, it's a disease that doesn't discriminate.
Right.
And it can impact anyone,
Yeah.
regardless of their fame or fortune.
Totally.
This thread, as unconventional as it may be,
Yeah.
forces us to confront that reality.
Totally.
It strips away the glamour and the notoriety
Right.
and leaves us with this raw human story of struggle and resilience.
And it makes you wonder about the role of this forum itself, right? On the one hand, you have this, like, incredibly detailed chronicle of Bam's life,
Right.
almost like a digital archive of his ups and downs.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's this undercurrent of, I don't know if morbid fascination is the right word, but something along those lines.
I think it's a complex issue without an easy answer.
Yeah.
On platforms like Kiwi Farms, you often see this blend of genuine concern and, yes, a certain level of morbid fascination.
Yeah.
It's important to be mindful of that,
Right.
to approach these spaces with a critical eye,
Yeah.
and to recognize that the people being discussed are real individuals with complex lives, not just characters in an ongoing saga.
For sure. It's a good reminder to check ourselves,
Yes.
even as we're, like, diving into this information.
Yeah.
But even with that in mind, I'm curious about your take on, like, the overall significance of Bam's story.
Okay.
We've talked about the specifics, but if we zoom out a bit,
Yeah.
what does this deep dive tell us about, like, the broader landscape of celebrity culture, addiction,
Yeah.
and our own relationship with these narratives?
It's like we're all holding pieces of this giant puzzle,
Yeah.
trying to make sense of it.
And this Kiwi Farms thread, it's like someone dumped out a box of puzzle pieces,
Yeah,
right?
that-
right in front of us.
Pieces everywhere.
Some pieces fit together, some don't,
Right.
but you keep trying to, like, make sense of the bigger picture.
Exactly. And with Bam, that bigger picture it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But it's also a reminder of the humanity,
Uh-huh.
right? At the center of these stories,
Yeah.
we see someone grappling with addiction, struggling to cope with the pressures of fame,
Yeah.
and ultimately trying to find their way back from the edge.
Yeah.
It's messy, it's complicated,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always have a neat resolution,
Right.
just like real life.
Right. It's such a stark contrast to the, like, carefully curated narratives.
Oh, yeah.
We often see, like in traditional media, on social media, everyone's always winning, always happy.
Right, perfect lives, right?
But this thread, it's like pulls back the curtain and shows that raw, unfiltered reality behind the scenes.
And that rawness, I think, is what draws people to these online spaces, you know?
Yeah.
It's a sense of unvarnished truth.
Totally.
Even if it's sometimes presented in a harsh or insensitive light.
Yeah.
But, and it's essential to remember this, there's a human cost to that exposure.
Yeah.
These aren't just characters on a screen.
Right.
They're real people with families, with feelings.
Yeah.
And their struggles deserve to be treated with compassion, even when we don't condone their actions. Right?
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, right?
It is.
Between acknowledging the very real harm that someone's actions might have caused, while also recognizing their humanity.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the drama, the gossip, the spectacle of it all.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But ultimately, I think it's about remembering that everyone has a story.
They do.
And those stories, as messy and complicated as they may be, are worth approaching with empathy and understanding.
Well said, and I think that's a powerful takeaway from this deep dive. You know, as we consume these stories, whether it's about Bam Margera or anyone else, navigating the often turbulent waters of fame and fortune.
Totally.
Let's try to do so with a bit more compassion,
a
bit more nuance,
and
a willingness to look beyond the surface, right?
Yeah.
And grapple with the complexities beneath.
Because at the end of the day, we're all human, right?
We are.
Trying to figure this thing called life out.
Trying to make it through.
Some of us just happen to do it with a few more cameras flashing.
That's it. That's it.
And a lot more internet commentary.
Yeah, a lot more eyes on you.
And for Bam, I think what we're left with is a sense of hope, right?
Yeah.
That he can find his way.
I hope that he can rewrite the ending to his story.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, by like engaging with these stories thoughtfully and compassionately, we can all contribute to a world where those second acts, those redemptive arcs become a little bit more common.
I love that.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
This was great.
A huge thanks to you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And to you out there listening, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll see you in the next one.